I mentioned in a previous review how I love the fact that most developers, especially indie developers, can take the blueprints of classic and beloved games, and can use that to create something completely new and amazing by evolving and iterating on it. I also said it was both for better or worse depending on the execution, because sometimes the devs may be more interested in making an affectionate parody of those games to mix positive results. Anyone who knows me or follows this channel should know I am a Metal Gear fanboy, and by extension a Kojima fanboy. I love the complexity and depth of the stealth gameplay, while also getting a really good time out of making sense of whatever convoluted plotline he's come up with, based on whatever movies he was seriously enjoying during development. So it should be a bit of a no-brainer that UnMetal is a game made for me. But with a small twist, it's picking up the 2D Metal Gear games, namely the second one, as its blueprint, while also throwing in some playful jabs at the long-winded dialogue of the solid games. But does this parody game manage to pull it all off and stand on its own? Well, I think it's best we start with the basics. UnMetal puts you in the interrogation chair of Jesse Fox, a civilian who was somehow imprisoned in Russia for a crime he didn't commit.
You're under arrest for a crime you didn't commit!
After escaping in a stolen helicopter and making it across the Iron Curtain, he ends up shot down and arrested by the American side, being interrogated on how he ended up in the chopper to begin with and how he allegedly escaped that base. On a surface level, the gameplay recreates to near perfection the gameplay from the Metal Gear series. Every screen is an interesting stealth challenge on how to get you to slip past guards or disposing of them as they get in your way, with the latter being the more common and recommended strategy, because once you knock them down, they will stay like this forever, unless another guard wakes them up. But one of the first twists the game throws at you is that you are not allowed to kill anyone, not a single person. You do get a gun later on so you can fight certain bosses and mechanical enemies, but if you shoot a human being, the game will enter panic mode, as you have to use one of your medkits to heal their wounds. The narrative explanation being that, unlike Solid Snake, Jesse Fox is a civilian who just happened to be unlucky enough to be caught up in the situation. But the good thing is, the gameplay is open enough that you can extract and lure guards into your grasp with a variety of methods. You can throw a coin, and any guard who sees it will happily go and pick it up.
Hey, a coin!
The idea being, the guards in this game are so greedy, they will happily grab anything they come across. You can do the classic stuff and make some noise so you can lure a guard away from his post, and then knock them out. Or, if you want to be even stealthier, later on you get a special rag soaked with chemicals that you can use to grab guards and make them silently fall asleep. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, because as you progress through the game, the stealth challenges get tougher. Some guards start waking up regardless if you beat them up, so you have to start thinking outside the box and put their bodies in a different place, so when they wake up, their field of vision won't be a problem for you. But that is, of course, if you end up making the choice of having those enemies. The second twist of this game's story, being told via flashbacks, is that Jesse Fox is an unreliable narrator. At many points in the game, you are given a choice for what he encounters during his journey, and this doubles as a way of making jokes, choosing your own adventure, but most importantly, they are like an invisible difficulty setting. Depending on what you choose, you can make the game easier or harder, or even sillier on yourself. And sometimes you may be stuck with what you choose, as the game tends to save right after making some of those choices. And that silliness is where the third twist of the game happens. Jesse Fox's escape story is loaded with meta humor along with the jokes. Part of that humor even includes making dialogue choices or even fiddling with your inventory, causing you to hilariously blow up and die. Or playful nods to the sillier stuff from the Metal Gear series and some of the wackier stuff players do during these games. To the point, Jesse Fox will refuse the most obvious common sense solutions because he is being that strict about showing how much of a goody-good action hero he is, in spite of supposedly being just a civilian.
Why did you break the toilet? Why not grab the paper like a normal person?
You know how prison is. It's kill or be killed. And I wasn't going to be killed by some dirty toilet.
It needs to be said, this game is at its best when it's emulating and even expanding a bit on the Metal Gear gameplay. Even during dialogue, there can be some really good flashes of brilliance for what is otherwise a very dumb story. But that style of humor and parody is also a double-edged sword. The silly choices you can make during gameplay can lead to laughs, but because of the way the checkpoints are set, it can create some nasty difficulty spikes that you cannot undo and have to adapt and overcome. And then there is when the game stops being a Metal Gear parody and goes on tangents of different game genres. They're sadly more miss rather than hits. I can deal with high difficulty. I say this very often. I don't mind getting stuck at some game sections for maybe even hours at a time, as long as I know it is my own fault for missing a detail or not grasping the challenge enough. It's a very different story when some of that difficulty means you cannot afford to make a single mistake, otherwise you fail and you gotta start over. And sadly, the proper Metal Gear gameplay is not exempt from this. To give you some context, the stealth in the Metal Gear games come with different levels of alertness. If you get spotted and get into a combat alert, the games are always lenient enough to let you defend yourself while you are looking for an ideal hiding spot to run away to as you wait for things to cool down and resume your mission. In UnMetal, however, getting spotted almost always means you are going to die, because the level design has no real way to help you hide from the entire hordes of enemy soldiers swarming in to kill you. Which makes me sus to the idea that maybe that ridiculous swarm of armed guards is part of the joke of how much overkill combat alerts are towards a single intruder. And this is what I have to point out. While I enjoyed this game greatly for the most part, I can see the humor being hit or miss, especially if you're coming in as an outsider who never played a Metal Gear game before. One of the biggest quirks of Hideo Kojima's writing is how often character dialogue becomes long-winded. Conversations can go into multiple tangents as the characters simultaneously discuss the events of the plot, while also waxing poetics about war and how governments treat human beings as disposable commodities. UnMetal pokes fun at this by having characters ramble about how silly or stupid Jesse Fox's adventure is. The dialogue is full of redundancies. Characters say a lot of words only to say very little. And despite his best efforts to embellish the story to make himself into the best hero to surpass Solid Snake, Jesse Fox can come off as looking like he's full of crap, and given how stupid things get, maybe he is. All this makes me remember a certain line from a critic I respect a lot. Just because you acknowledge it, it doesn't mean it works. That's part of why I don't count the humor and writing as a negative, because it is very subjective. Thankfully for those potential flaws, the game has one of the best perks of its type. You can skip entire dialogue sequences, because, you're not exactly making fun of games that interrupt gameplay every 5 seconds to have dialogue if you are actually doing it yourself, no matter how much self-aware comedy you insert into those interruptions. But you can chalk a lot of this to cultural differences. After all, the devs behind this game are from Spain, and Spanish being their first language. So a lot of this stuff won't really get across proper in English, or if you're not the audience for this kind of writing. Thankfully, those flaws are very minor, because even if you ignore most of the story and stick to mostly the gameplay, there is plenty of fun to be had, and enough room for player expression, with some really good and tense gameplay segments where actual skill can be shown off once you get a handle on the mechanics. Those really good moments reminded you that this is indeed a Metal Gear game by a Metal Gear fan. To the point it makes me want to see more games in this style, because as they often say, they don't make them like this anymore. By the end of the day, would I recommend this? It's complicated. If you're a Metal Gear fan, I say this game is definitely worth a go. If you don't like stealth games or you never played the Metal Gear series and would like this to be your entry point, I'd say proceed with caution, as this game will require patience, but in digesting its brand of humor and in getting acquaintance with the gameplay and challenges that come with it. Personally, I enjoyed this game a lot. It scratched all the right itches and reminded me why, in spite of some of its silliness and convoluted writing, I legit love this genre and particular style of story. Because there is something fun and almost magical to being just one guy stuck in hostile territory with very few tools at your disposal. Managing to use your skill and wits to mess with heavily armed guards and beat the odds is one of the most satisfying feelings I've gotten when playing a game. It also helps that, even if the humor can be hit or miss, it's a better kind of meta humor compared to those that constantly make references to other media or keeps going on and on explaining the joke. I do hope we get to see more games in this style. Not necessarily as parodies, but more in taking the old games as blueprints to make something new and fun. Because if the big companies are going to spend their time chasing trends and playing it safe for the sake of making money printing blockbusters, we might as well let the indies and middle market games take all those fun risks those other companies wouldn't usually make.